options handy. You know, the Hawkesbury River's probably only 45 minutes down the road. I've got Lake Macquarie, which is a fantastic place to catch Mulloway, Newcastle Harbour, which is famous, and so there's some Port Stephens just up the road, so it's a pretty good spot.
It's Mulloway City, isn't it, all that part of the world? Whether you like, fishing the beaches, or whether you like the estuaries or the rivers, or even offshore on the reefs, there's no shortage of options for the Mulloway in that part of the world.
No, beach fishing as well, beach rock, you name it, the river systems. So we've got to give it to you Queenslanders a little bit, because, you guys have got coral trout and red emperor and all these other cool fish to chase. So we've got to take some serious ownership of a few of them, and Mulloway's one, of course. Snapper's another one that we probably have a better crack at than what you blokes do, and we're proudly in Mulloway country here, put it that way.
You're holding the Mulloway up as the trophy fish. Excellent, mate. How do you compare the southern Mulloway with the northern black jew, mate? Give us a quick comparison.
Look, I've been really quite fortunate to catch both of them at quite a big size. The traditional southern Mulloway up to close on 40 kilos, and I've caught black jew to 35 kilos. So I've had a bit of a crack at both. I think if we use a rugby league or a rugby union analogy, the black jew are built like front rowers. They're big, stocky, heavy built, shouldered fish. And I reckon the southern Mulloway is more like a second rower. That's how I sort of look at them. I think that the issue with black jew is where you catch them. Quite often, there's a lot of heavy cover nearby, and you do need to fish quite heavy just to extract them away from the cover. But they are, man, I don't know, they're both tough. You get any fish that weighs 35 kilos and try and hand it your objective and not take a lesson from them, then you're generally going to come out second best. So I'd say pound for pound, I may just give it to the black fellas there. I think
yeah. Look, they're a tough fish. Unfortunately, they're also a little bit fragile. They don't seem to cope with being released as well as the southern Mulloway do. Unfortunately,
no, not as tough like Queenslander. They're not as tough as us New South Wales. So unfortunately, they're good if you catch them in the shallow. I've caught them off. The last ones I caught were off Cape Capricorn. I think we're catching them on 7-inch soft plastics in the shallow water, and they certainly released really well in the shallows. But I think, like any of those sort of Mulloway, those demersals, when you bring them up in the deeper water, they can struggle a bit. It's funny. I was catching some nice southern Mulloway the other week in 40 metres of water. First one we caught up in 40 metres came up at the same pace on the same tackle as the second one, and it was absolutely dead when it made the surface. I was a bit disappointed, so we dispatched that, iced it down. We're going to eat that one. The next one, slightly bigger fish, rocketed to the bottom, and about the same catch time. So it's really weird. I'm not quite sure what happens to them.
I guess fish are individual, just like human beings are, mate. And we all have different stages of our health.
Oh, that's
it. So as my wife will probably point out, I probably need to look a little bit more at my health at the moment. So anyway. We'll move on from that subject.
We won't dwell on that one. Let's go.
We won't, mate. We're talking happy stuff. We're talking fishing for Mulloway. So welcome along. We've got Jim and Corey and Miro Fish with us. So great to have you guys here. Let us know where you're coming in from, guys. Just type something into the chat there so we know where you're coming in from. We're going to make a start, Guesty. So I've got some screenshots that you've sent through for us to have a bit of a sticky at. So let me put one of those up. I'm just going to make a switch here, so bear with me as I work with the technology. So this first one, mate, you're talking all about how jewfish are, such a school fish.
Yeah, I think one of the big things you got to remember is that at times, and I know I've suffered it before when I've looked at my sounder, and I think we don't believe what we see. I think that's definitely an issue with people with sounders in general. With Sonar, whether using a Lowrance product, which should be, by the way, or not. But really, I think people struggle to believe the amount of what they see. And that school of Mulloway there, I actually didn't shoot that vision. I had a mate of mine who was diving at the time. I was busy making television, but he was diving at the time, and over a 200-metre length, there was probably 500 fish there. So that was good news for me, because I was certainly confident I was going to get a bite there somewhere, if you know what I mean. But just goes to show you, when you're looking at your sounder, believe what you see, because it doesn't tell stories unless you've got it on simulator mode. And I'm sure we've all had a crack at that once in a while. But believe what you see, trust in what you can see, and if the fish aren't biting, then it's up to you to change your technique, your tackle, the time of day, come back on the tide change, come back just on low light conditions. You need to change it up to have some success.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, mate. Look, we've got a whole bunch of guys checking in now. Tremendous to have you all here. So thank you for coming along. And one of the guys who's just checked in is Craig Engler, and that's fortuitous, mate, because Craig's posted us a question. So I'm just going to pop Craig's question up on the screen, and we might have a bit of a stab at addressing that one, hey?
Yeah, for sure.
So Craig's asked us, mate, do actively feeding Mulloway sound up differently to inactive fish? Now, for those who saw a bit of a promo post or a promo video on Saturday night, we've kind of already started to answer this, but mate, as promised, you've got some screenshots to help us explain it. So once again, let me just switch over and put on that screenshot to help you along.
And look, that's a great question, I should say, Craig. And so I'm scratching around looking at a few. So if you look at that, that's probably a traditional sort of a screen setup that I would use when I'm targeting Mulloway in my local estuary system on Vibe. So that's from Lake Macquarie, that one there. And there's two Mulloway there. One, that the bottom fish is obviously bigger than the one that's above there. You can see it a bit better than, thank you for that, sir. He zoomed in, so that's really good. And the bottom fish is around about 90 centimetres, and the top one, I would imagine 65 to 70 centimetres. So, and you can see those, that if you look at the angle of those fish, they're both looking upwards. So whenever a fish is looking upwards towards the surface, then it's generally in a feeding mode. Mulloway that are not in that feeding mode will be, swimming around each other in that schooling sort of tempo. They'll be hugging the bottom. They'll be trying to find a bit of a back eddy to hide in the current. But those fish are both actively feeding. I actually ended up catching, I reckon it was the larger of those two. It was 94 centimetres on a Vibe. And just not in that screenshot, but just in that area, they were feeding tailor schools feeding. So you've got this natural burley trail happening where the tailor are chopping up the white bait, and that's feeding down into the system. And that's always a good sign for me when I'm chasing Mulloway and lures. And I caught those fish just off to the side. So I'd say they'd probably been up mid-water at some point and then come back down, and they're looking for their next attack up. So if they're in that upward-facing position, as you can see them on the sander there, A, you need to get excited. B, you're a good chance of getting a bite, and C, it's just a matter of working out what they're going to feed on, and if you can get your lure or your bait presented in the right mode, then I think you're a really good chance of a bite.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. So the next question I have, of course, is how do you tell what bait they're feeding on? Can you say and I tell you that?
Well, that's a bit of local knowledge too, I think. Yeah, well, in that situation, I caught a couple of tailor on topwater lures before I caught those fish that day. Grabbed the tailor, they threw up these clear-looking white bait that are about 90 mil long to 100 mil long, and I was using 100 mil clear Vibe. So I reckon I had that side of it pretty well worked out, and I knew roughly what the fish would be feeding on that area just through sheer local knowledge. So that definitely makes a difference. And anyone who's caught Mulloway before knows how fussy they can be at times. Other times they'll eat just about anything. But I know I've had live slimy mackerel, live yellowtail, live pike out before, and then look in my esky and there's an old frozen squid there. Oh yeah, dust that off, hurl it out, bang! You catch two in a row on just because it was a squid. So yeah, they can be fussy things at times.
Well, they don't follow the rules like most fish. They don't listen to us.
Bloody things follow rules, Greg. That's what they do.
Well, that's right. So, look, that's tremendous, mate. Now, look, we've got quite a few people that have started to check in now. So, folks, if you do have questions of Guesty as we're going along, feel free to post them there. We'll try and address any questions as they come up. Obviously, we might not have screenshots. So the lesson there is, if you're just joining us and you're going to post a question here, maybe next time jump on the website first and post a question in advance so we've got time to prepare for you. So
we can tick Craig off. I think we did a reasonable job for Craig because he was.
Well, in fact, Craig's just popped up on the screen saying thanks for your answer.
No worries, Craig.
Well done. All right, mate. Let's move on to the next question because we've got a couple to work through. So this one comes from our friend Extreme Armchair Angler. So he's asking what the difference is in sonar signature between Mulloway and other species that might be present. Now, John left quite a lengthy email. It was a lot more detailed than this, but he was asking the question about distinguishing between, for example, Mulloway and school shark, or Mulloway and large tailor, or other snapper, other species that might be in the same vicinity. So let me just bring up your screenshot again, mate, and that'll assist you with.
I think I've spoken to John via email before, and John, if it's the same John that I think it is, he's always got very, very detailed questions. So I'll try and get a reasonably detailed answer.
Yes.
That screenshot you can see there, that it's not actually a screenshot that I took on the sounder. It's one that I've grabbed while we were filming. So that fish, it was pretty cool. I actually did a video for Lowrance about catching that fish, and I was with the guy called Barney who fishes on my show a little bit. And we'd caught a few fish the day before in that general area. And the day before, we actually marked for 4 Mulloway, caught 3 of them all around that metre mark. Well, one was about metre 7, I think, and lost another one, had 4 bites. So that day, we went back in that area, needed one more fish to finish the show off. So we're looking for Mulloway. I want to see a Mulloway. And when you see one and you know you've done enough fishing, you know it's a Mulloway, you're going to get super confident about your chances, and it's good to know that the fish are under the boat. So the thing that I'm looking for when I'm looking at a Mulloway, and that one there is probably one of the better sounding pictures you'll get of an active Mulloway. Once again, if you look at that picture, you can see it's angling up slightly towards those bait schools. Those bait schools are tiny little tailor, probably only 50 to 60 mil long tailor. So, and he's looking to travel up in slightly deeper water than the other screenshot before, nearly 18 metres deep there. So I looked at that and I went, that is a metre Mulloway. If you look at that screenshot, you can even see on the down scan there with the fish reveal, the shape of it. So big in the shoulders, like you'd expect a Mulloway to look forward, tapering back down towards the tail and then tapering back down a little bit towards the head. So whereas if it was a tailor, so if they were 50 centimetre tailor, they're quite thin and streaky. They're a more of a pelagic type fish. They don't have such a big swim bladder. The bigger the swim bladders, the better the sonar read that you'll get back as well. So I find that Mulloway are one of those fish that do mark up very, very well, even better than a kingfish of the same size. So a metre kingfish doesn't seem to mark as well on the down scan as a metre Mulloway. And one of the really important things, if you do hook a Mulloway, once you hook a fish that you think's a Mulloway, just turn back, have a look at the screen, have a look at that screen. If you get a chance, take a screenshot, or you can scroll back through your sounder once you landed as well, and have a look at what that fish looks like on the sounder. It doesn't matter what type of fish you're catching, but that's how I've sort of taught myself to know what to look for. And it's a great question John has, because you don't want to invest a whole heap of time on 5 school sharks. If you want to catch a Mulloway, you're better off moving to another spot. So it's all about recognising what you're looking at on the sounder, and then if you catch a Mulloway that's 1.1 metres long, 90 centimetres long, have a look at your sounder as that fish is coming up through underneath the transducer, and then that will help you identify those fish down the track.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm going to come back on the screen now, Matt. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm going to pop a couple of those up. So hopefully we've answered Extreme Armchair Angler's question. If not, I'm sure we'll both receive an email tomorrow with a request for further information.
Hi, John. How you going?
He's a great guy, and I thoroughly enjoy his emails and the great advice and feedback he gives me. So tremendous stuff. Now, Matt, I'm going to put up a comment that we've just received here from Dave Stewart. So Dave's asking, if you're targeting Jews over a hole, where's the best place to drop your line? Halfway up or where? What depth?
Fish where the fish are. A mate of mine, Jason Metcalf, who lives in Bundaberg in Queensland, that was his saying. So I'm not going to, I don't own that saying, but fish where they are, and that's where electronics play a massive part of it. So if the fish are stacked at one side or the other, then you need to set yourself up. So generally, Mulloway like to sit. They generally hang out in areas where there's a bit of tidal flow, a bit of current. So if I'm looking at, say, a hole and the fish are just sort of milling around in there, happy days, because I know they're there to start with. If they're sitting in that pressure edge out of the current, then you need to set up backup current and try and set your live bait, your dead bait, or if you're casting lures, you've got to do the opposite thing. You've got to park down the other end with your electric motor and then cast back up current. But if let's say I'm soaking a dead bait or a live bait, then you need to set up so that allow for that current flow and try and get your bait right in that right area. And once again, what you'll find is when the current's raging, sometimes they can be a little bit tougher, a little bit slower, and they may just mill around and be happy to sit there. But you'll find if there's bigger numbers, then you've got more of a chance to bite. One will come out grab your bait if it's in the right spot. But as that tide slows down, this is where it's really cool to keep an eye on your sounder. You'll find they'll lift up off the bottom. That place, that hole where they're hanging out when it's not a feeding time, big fuse may well leave there and go and hunt the local breakwall, some other structure, just go charging around looking for bait, and then come back and mill around there again mid-tide change or mid. You've always got those peak bite times, early in the morning, late in the evening, through the night. Of course, Mulloway have fantastic nighttime predators, but those tide changes are really, really key. So I'll have places that I look at in my local waterways, where whether it be Newcastle Harbour, Lake Macquarie, Port Stephens, wherever it is, and if I go and find Mulloway there mid-tide in a hole, as the question, and they're sitting down on the bottom of the hole, and the tide change coincides with the sun going down in 3 hours' time, then I might leave those fish alone, and then I'll sneak back around so I don't drive straight over the top of them, and I'll set myself up and then put a bait presentation right where they should be. And hopefully, as you get closer to that tide change, they're more active and you're going to get a bite that way.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realise also that fish, like every animal, actually sleep. So just because they can't close their eyes, they don't have eyelids, doesn't mean that they don't sleep. And so quite often, I suspect with Mulloway, as with many other species, when they're mooching around in that deep water around bridge pylons and things, and you're finding they're hugging the bottom and they're not feeding, they may well be sleeping. When they're up off the bottom, you know that they're doing something, they're active.
Exactly. Yeah, well, if they've had a big night out and they've fed really hard, they're just not interested. They've got a full belly, and
they could be sulking as well, because Guesty's been giving them a hard time, and they've gone back feeling a bit tired and sorry for themselves. So, mate, thank you, Dave, for that question. I hope we've answered that for you. I'm going to bring up another question now from Brad. Let me just see whether I can make the technology work. That'll help.
What's the best way to find Dewey marks offshore?
There we go. Yeah. So what's the best way to find Dewey marks offshore? What do you look for? Well, the first thing I would look for is I'd see if I can get onto Guesty's boat and get a few lat longs off his GPS. If you can manage that, you're probably going to get on a few pretty quick smart.
You might notice that the GPS coordinates on those screenshots have been photoshopped out, and I make no apologies for that. So Mulloway are one of those fish that I love giving out information on how to catch them. And I had a guy contact me a while ago via Facebook from Real Action and say, geez, why don't you, I'm really disappointed you don't give the GPS marks out. I'll say, mate, I'd be dead. You'd be coming to my funeral, Greg, if I did that, because it's not like my marks, I've got mates. But the greatest thing is if you can obtain some knowledge, and that's the best thing about what we do fishing, is every time you go out, you learn more and more, and then go and find your own spot and put it into practice. So if I'm going to go and find an offshore Dewey spot, Deweys are a funny thing where you'll find that they congregate consistently in the same area. So firstly, I would try and talk to the local tackle stores, find out, and they might say, Grego's reef out off such and such a point tends to hold Deweys. Okay, great. So that's the first thing. If you can get a bit of local knowledge, because they don't tend to hang on all the areas, but I like to look for shallow reefy areas in and around that sort of 15 to 20 metres that are close to a beach, close to a headland. They're the sort of areas I reckon where Mulloway will stage during the day. You'll quite often find it's your local bait reef. So there's schools of yellowtail, slimy mackerel, pike, all of those sorts of fish. Big squid might be hanging around there. If there's any undercuts or caves, they love hanging underneath ledges and caves. If you've done a bit of diving like I have, you'll see where they like to hang out there. And I reckon that you drive past so many Mulloway where people go to the local bait ground, for example, they burley up, they catch their bait, and then they move off and go and chase mackerel, snapper, or go into the deeper water, and you're actually driving past where the fish are. So those sort of shallow reefs that have access to really good beach structure, I reckon they're a real prime spot. The fish will stage there. When it gets close to dark, they become active. And I know that the fisheries tag some Mulloway with acoustic tags years ago, and then they start off on a little reef. They go to one headland, they go right down the beach, get to the other end, turn around, hunt right up the beach in the dark, and end up back at the same reef as the sun's coming up. So I look at those spots that I reckon they're key spots. Anywhere where bait is consistently holding is always a good place to catch a Mulloway.
It's amazing how many people go catch their bait on the bait reef and then go somewhere else to go fishing when the jewfish are generally right where the bait's caught.
Right, left the bait. And the one thing that we do, like making television, we have our fantastic days, which you get to see those on TV, but we have our days when it's quiet too. Don't worry about that. So we're always looking for that bonus fish. And if we're jigging bait, the first thing I have on my rod is I'll have a paternoster style rig with a 3-way swivel and an 8-0 circle hook in it. And the first live bait we catch, quite often I'll just drop it over the side. And you'll be surprised how many times that results in all sorts of fish, not just mulloway.
Now, mate, we've got a whole bunch of questions coming through. So, guys, don't be alarmed if we're not answering them straight away. We have got a few starting to pile up here now, and we'll do our best to get through all of them. So, Guesty, we've got Dwayne asking, do the same rules apply for mulloway and estuaries?
Yeah, so estuaries is a very broad description, and depends if you're talking estuaries like my Lake Macquarie is different to fishing, a river system that runs out in a river mouth. So I do a lot of fishing there as well. So I think you'll find that whether you're fishing any of the major rivers up and down New South Wales, they all tend to hold mulloway at some level, especially along the man-made rock walls, around pylons, around anywhere there's a bit of a back eddy that they can hold. So they're the sort of areas that I'm looking to target, because I know that they're on as it gets dark, and once again as the tide slows up, you'll catch them right up in the shallow areas. They'll tend to charge around a little bit further. So looking for areas, and you'll find in your local estuary system there's places where the bait tends to hold consistently. So once again, it becomes a feeding station. I know in my local Lake Macquarie, there's all sorts of little secret places that people have got where they fish. And they're all bait stations in my book. And what you'll find is that the mulloway will come and they'll turn up on, when I say en masse, it might be a school of 8 or 9 of them will turn up. They'll disperse the bait there, harass it, eat some of it, and then they'll swim 300 or 400 metres to the next spot and do the same thing again. So they tend to move around a little bit. So anywhere there's consistent bait is a really good place to start.
Yeah, great stuff. Mate, I'm going to put this next question up. I think it's probably going to lead into another screenshot. So would you like me to bring that screenshot up for you now?
Look, for sure. And pop that one up. So I'll bring up the screenshot. And this also alludes back to a question that we had before about what different fish look like. If you can get your side scan working really well. So if you look at that side scan shot there now, I've got down scan on one side and side scan. So that side scan shot there is of barramundi, and you can plainly see they're barramundi. They're around that 80 centimetre size, but you can see as plain as day in that shallow water, shooting out to one side there, that they are barra. You can see the shape of them, down to that sort of pointier nose, the tail. They are definitely barra, and there's no reason at all. And side scan works really well, not only for barra, Murray cod, but certainly for mulloway. As you get deeper, it gets a little bit tougher. But if you're in a river system, estuary system, that's in that sort of anywhere from that 15 metres to 5 metres, 100% you'll get those great shadows. If you're spot locked, so if you're anchored or spot locked in one spot, and you've got a bit of tidal flow there, and you're on somewhere where you're thinking the mulloway going to show up, I would definitely have that side scan punching out. And keeping an eye on it, and you'll quite often see a school that might be swimming out 20 metres off to one side, so you need to cast a lure out or get a bait out that way as well. So let you know where they are. But side scan's a very, very useful tool for targeting mulloway. We use it when we're chasing them on lures a lot. So when we're either drifting with the breeze or using electric motor to move us along, and I'm looking down at side scan, obviously looking at down scan and sonar, so I'll have the whole three up on the screen. And I find when I'm hunting big open basin, like sort of flat areas, my local lake, there's big open areas where you catch a lot of fish feeding underneath tailor schools. So I'm looking for that bait that the tailor's feeding on, and the mulloway are hanging around that. And side scans, you might not always see the mulloway on there, but quite often you'll see where the bait is. You work your way towards the bait, and then suddenly they'll appear on the side scan, obviously on down scan and sonar as well. So firstly, you're looking for those clouds of bait off in the distance, and instead of turning right, it might be the difference between you turning right and left. So at least you're following the bait and hopefully finding the dewies that way.
Yeah, good stuff. Now we've got more questions pouring in, so I'll bring the next one up. So this one's not necessarily a sonar one, but that's fine. We're happy to talk about dewy fishing more generally. So Brett's asking, Michael, do you have a preferred scent when you're using lures for Mulloway, for example, gulps?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think we all know that gulp works exceptionally well on most fish, and I'd love if they brought out a gulp paste or a gulp scent. Would be just unbelievably good for when you're using things like vibes. Yeah, I think scent can play a huge difference between getting a fish to bite that's almost there and one that's not quite there. So yeah, I think he's saying excluding gulps there. I'm trying to think what scent I've been using lately. Sax, I think it's a little Sax Dizzy scent. That's pretty cool. All of those scents seem to work, at different times. Even I'll use S Factor at times, occasionally. It just depends on what you're into. But I think the biggest thing is not to rely on it too much. So don't think to yourself, oh, I have to cut. I think people get addicted to using that stuff a little bit too, instead of really, concentrating on getting an extra cast in and making sure, that your lure's swimming properly. Vibing is a big thing for Mulloway. So I think it's really crucial to make sure that you've got that lure swimming properly, that you've got an action that they like. I've been lucky enough to fish a fair bit with Harry Watson from Jackal Lures. So Harry and I have had some fantastic sessions catching Mulloway on vibes, and he took me to school there one day, showing me, hey, Guesty, I think you should try this technique, which I just love that. So I had a technique that works for me, and I've caught them when he hasn't caught them before when we've fished. And we had one day there, we really, I think we caught 10 there one afternoon, and just with short, sharp, up and down vibes. Sure, a bit of scent makes a difference, but it was more about keeping that lure in the fish's face and really getting the most out of it. And that's just through practice, I think. So.
Yeah, so you're right. If you haven't got everything else right, putting scent on a lure is not going to change the result. You've still got to be using the right lure in the right way, at the right place.
It can definitely help, especially in discoloured water and at night time. It looks right. The Mulloway will sit there and he goes, "That looks pretty cool. I want to eat it." And hey, listen, it smells pretty good as well. I'll go through with the whole commitment to the program. So.
Well, the other interesting thing, a lot of people don't realise that we human beings have taste buds in our mouths where there's moisture, but fish have taste buds all over their body. So if you've got a lure with a bit of scent that's just wafting off it and it's close to a fish, they've got taste buds on the side of their face, down their lateral line, on their fins. So they're actually getting a taste of it before they take it into their mouths. And the interesting thing is, you'll hear people say with a soft plastic that's got scent on it, "Oh, let them take it and get a taste of it before you set the hook." Well, they've actually tasted it before it's in their mouth. And inside their mouth, there's very few taste buds. So by the time they've taken it, they've already done the tasting. So there's a bit of nerdy, geeky science stuff for you. So
time to set the hook. But it's interesting you mentioned the lateral line. And I know every time I pick a Mulloway up, they're such a cool looking fish with that sort of diamond scale pattern. Lateral line that runs down. They're like little diamonds that go along there, that purple, bluish sort of colour. And they have got a fantastically big, long lateral line. They're a true predator of the dark as well. So I think you've got to try and use that to your advantage. That's why lures that vibrate and rattle can make a big difference. A live bait that's really kicking around can make a big difference as well.
They can sense that from a long way. Yep. All right, little change of pace here, mate. We're going surf fishing now. So Shannon Perry's asking us for the best moon for catching dewies on the beach. Yep. He's going to be on Moreton Island late next month, and he's after a couple of tips, mate.
If I'm fishing the beach, I'm looking for that 9 o'clock high tide. So you're looking for, when you're talking about moons, I like big tides on the beach. I don't like them so much when I'm fishing. Certainly river mouths and estuaries, I tend to look for that half moon. So I've got the neap tides, but on the beach, I'm looking for that full moon. I think the night of the full moon, generally, right on the full moon, is about a 9 o'clock high tide. So leading up to that, you'll get a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So that sort of 4-day window into, and then right up to midnight, you get about 6 or 7 days of those high tides. The last one you fish might be, a midnight high tide. But anytime you can get that high tide an hour or two after the sun goes down, well, I reckon you're in with a chance. I think the dewies seem to be more confident about coming right in close. And let's face it, you put a drone up and have a look at a beach, and you think you're fishing, out far enough, and quite often you're not. Like there's some fantastic structure that needs a fair bit of water to give them the confidence to come in and hunt. So I'd be looking for those tides for sure.
There you go, Shannon. I hope that answers your question. I hope you've timed your trip to coincide with those tides.
What have we got? Late next month, we got right on half a moon right now as we speak. So we just had the new moon, so we've got a full moon in 2 weeks' time. So late next month, he might be back on the new moon again. So there'll be a high tide that works in somewhere, I reckon. So
good timing. Good luck, Shannon. I hope that helps you out, mate, and you get a few dewies. All right. So now I'm going to have to read this one out for you, mate, because it's a little bit longer, so it doesn't all fit on the screen. So we've got Peter Newens who's saying he fishes the Shoalhaven River and the basin, mainly targeting Mulloway, but he hasn't actually marked any Mulloway on his sounder. So he's saying he's fishing areas where he's sure they're present. Is not having side scan a huge downfall, and he's getting a truckload of decent flatties, but the Mulloway are eluding him after many hours of casting.
Welcome to Mulloway fishing. Sorry, mate. I shouldn't laugh. St George's Basin, I love. My in-laws come from down that way, but I love fishing there. It's like a mini Lake Macquarie where I fish. So it's a even though I don't fish it as often as I'd like to, I feel like the same techniques that we use work very, very well. And Mulloway, I quite often wonder whether they're not a little bit skittish in some of those shallower lakes, like our lakes where they sort of shy off the boat noise. And I know a lot of the fish that I catch, if I mark them on the down scan and sonar, and I go, oh, there's dewies there, well, quite often it's too late for me to catch them. So I'll mark them in, and then I'll leave them alone maybe for 45 minutes, an hour, and come back and then try and fish back up to them. So it's like catching a big snapper on a soft plastic. Now, the big long cast right away from the boat, slowly wafting down, generally is going to yield the big snapper. That sort of straight, direct underneath the boat, yeah, sometimes, but not as often as the big cast. And I think that can be the same with Mulloway. So answering your question, yes, side scan, St George's Basin is definitely an advantage. As I said, it's a similar type scenario to what I fish a lot at home. And not only will it show you where the Mulloway are, but also show you where the bait's holding. And those, once again, Mulloway aren't going to be too far away.
Yeah, cool, mate. All right. Well, look, we've got a long line of questions from Matt, Miro, Todd, Reese. They're piling up. I'm just going to switch over, though, because we did have Paul Tull, who posted us a question earlier in the week. So I might just go over to that one, mate. And
you get rights over these other guys, so you're going with him first, Greg. You're not trading.
Well, he got in early, mate. He sent us a question via email, so you've got a screenshot to share with us. So I think we're going to pull rank.
We're going to pull rank.
So Paul's saying, how do I detect baitfish schools when the boat's moving quickly? So I'm heading from one spot to another, or I'm trolling or whatever, and I want to be able to spot those bait schools. How do I set my sounder up to do that, mate?
Look, I think the biggest thing is you've got to make sure that you've got a transducer set up properly in the first place. So make sure you get that transducer in that sweet spot at the transom where it's got a little bit of tiny bit of angle down. About 3 degrees is really good, so that you've got that nice clean water flow flowing over the face of the transducer. It's the same thing if you wind the window down in your car and you put your hand out and you dip your fingers, you're going to feel that air pressure go over your hand that way. If you just tilt your fingers up a little bit, you'll feel all that air pressure, and it's like lift, same way a plane takes off. So you want that water flow to be running over the transducer. If you don't have that, or the transducer's kicked up, the faster you go, doesn't matter. You can have the best sounder in the world. If you don't set your transducer up properly, you're not going to achieve the best picture. So then when I'm flying along at 30, 40 knots, screaming across my local estuary system, quite often, if I mark some bait, it'll just be a dead set, like a post, a telegraph post. It'll just be really quite a quick mark. And then if I turn around and slow down and go back over that at 4 knots instead of 40 knots, then all of a sudden that little bit of a whip mark will be a nice big bait school that's there. So you need to keep an eye on that. You may have to play around with depends on your vessel and how your transducer's set up, but increase your sensitivity when you're flying along. So have that sensitivity bar up on the side. Just crack a bit more sensitivity in there when you're flying along, and then when you pull your speed back, if you're going to go trolling or you're going to pull up and just cruise around electric motor, then you need to drag that sensitivity back again and to clean the picture up. But as you go faster, you may have to just punch a little bit back in there. But you got to remember your sonar ping does not go any faster when you're flying along. Your sonar hits the bottom, comes back up. So you're only marking every so often. So when you slow down, then you can really sort of create that picture that you want to see. So.
There you go, Paul. I hope that helps you out, mate. If not, if you're listening in, by all means, post a question there. We'll make sure that we get to it before the night's out. So on to the next one, Guesty. Here we go. So we've got Miro Fish. How do you determine the nature of the surface you're fishing using your sounder? So how do you know if you're fishing reef, rock, sand, mud, those kinds of things?
Yeah, well, you'll see if you look at your conventional sonar picture there. you'll see the colour change in there. So if you're on that sort of ready, I quite often use that standard colour that they come with. I play around with palettes. I'm not a massive fan of some of the colours. I like to stick with there you go. You can see the colour that I've got there. So that bottom in that picture there is quite a muddy bottom, and you'll see that there's a thin layer of that sort of orangey type colour. There's maybe a little bit of weed growing on top that you can see there, and then it goes into that darker section, so it's a deep mud. So if that was hard rock, if you look at the colour up above on the surface there, that really dark red, it would look like that. And then when you get onto the sand, you'll find it actually even in that colour palette, it'll be quite smooth, so it won't have that ruffled sort of a top, that appearance on the surface, and it'll be a lighter colour again. So it's really definition of colour tells you how hard the bottom it is. Certainly, so a hard rock is going to be quite a dark sort of red, rich red, dark colour, and then as you sort of get into softer densities of bottom, then that colour generally lightens off a little bit.
Excellent stuff. Just bear with me as I struggle with technology here, guys. It's just too many buttons to press. It's all very exciting, but it's also fraught with danger. So, all right, let's scroll through. We've got so many more questions, so I'm not sure we'll get through all of them, but we'll do our best. So, Matt Levy is asking us, Guesty, how long do you spend looking for new ground versus actually fishing? Great question, by the way, Matt. I get this one all the time.
That's a seriously good question. There is nothing worse than spending a heap of time fishing ground when the fish aren't there. So if I'm going to go and fish if I'm really targeting Mulloway, I go and fish one of my local estuary systems. I'll spend an hour sometimes driving around looking to see A, where the fish are, B, where the bait's holding. And I'd rather spend an hour doing that than spend 2.5 hours sitting in a spot where there's no fish. So you've got to mark them. It's funny. I remember years and years ago fishing one of my local estuaries, and I took an older fella out who just was a Jewy fisherman from way back, but he would just go and say, I fish off that point, or I fish off this rock wall, and this is where I sit, and they'll eventually swim past and we'll catch them. It's like, that's all good, but I'm making TV. I need to catch fish, and I would rather do it this way. So then we drove along. I can distinctly remember it. My young fellow was fishing with me at the time, and we marked seven fish, and I said to him, there's 7 Mulloway. And he looked at me like, really? And I said, mate, I'm telling you, there's 7 Jewies. They're not big ones, but hey, they're nice fish, in that 70 centimetre, maybe 80 centimetres, but mostly in that sort of 70. So they look about that size. We pulled up there, spot locked. We were fishing with live baits. We caught 7 Mulloway. No word of a lie, right? So then we did that. Fantastic. Then we moved off because he said, I've got this spot up further. It'll be really good. We'll go and have a look. Anyway, I had side scan punching right out. It was quite a shallow area. It was only probably 6 to 7 metres deep. I drove around there. I didn't mark a single fish, not a fish. And we had lunch up there. And I said, mate, we had some baits out. And I said, mate, there's nothing here. Okay. So then we headed back down the estuary system, found another school of Mulloway. There was 6 there. We caught 6 more. No joke. We caught 13 for the day. Marked 6 more. So spend time driving around looking for fish. 100% spend. Doesn't mean that you're going to pull up on a magic school of Jewies and just catch them straight away. But hey, mark that in, and on that part of the tide they're holding there for sure. Move up, have a crack at them. If they're not biting, then maybe move off. But you'll find you'll tend to want to go back there and have another crack. But say you're 3 hours away from a tide change, I'd go back and spend an hour onto that tide change, or the last hour of dark in that area where they are for sure. So yeah.
There you go, Matt. Hope that helps. So Todd's asking, mate, how do you work your lures? Do you work them aggressively, or do you work them more subtly?
Totally depends on that depends on a lot of things. The type of the lure that you're using. I find in when the water's a bit warmer, the fish are sort of up and active and moving. You can be quite aggressive with your lure, and I actually pulled out of a really good Mulloway this week. I was fishing around a heap of bait, cast a vibe out, and it was quite early in the morning, fishing in 9 metres of water, and I just got the bail arm over and bang, hooked it up, smoked around, and the boat and went back underneath the boat and out the other way. It was a good fish, well over a metre. Unfortunately, pulled the hooks on it. Damn it, wasn't happy about that. But so that just shows you how active that fish was. But then if you mark fish, and we've been looking at some different screenshots there today, or tonight I should say, and they're sitting hard. If they're sitting hard on the bottom with their heads down, then you've really, maybe, especially if it's a vibe or a soft plastic, you've really got to get it in their face and perhaps slow that, be more annoying, slower sort of twitches, slow it down and try and get that to work. And that was, a bit of a tip. As I said, when I fished with Harry Watson, we're only probably moving our rod tip with our vibes 100 mil, but right 14 metres of water right on their heads, and we're actually walking around the boat, keeping it right in their face to the point where I think it was just annoying them in the end and you'd get a bite. Whereas I quite often, I don't mind those long lifts. It's that long lift with a vibe or a soft plastic, bring it up and have it flutter back down again. That seems to work as well. But I guess anytime you can keep a lure that's A, swimming properly, and B, has something about it the fish like and keep it in their face longer, then you're more chance of a bite. So
good stuff. There you go, Todd. Hope that helps you, mate. So Reese is asking, Guesty, have you ever heard of jewfish being caught in the Tuggerah Lakes?
No, I haven't inside the Tuggerah Lakes. So, the real odd one, I've heard of the pros occasionally, the professional fishermen occasionally netting one, but I do know that they do catch them quite regularly off the beach at the mouth of Tuggerah Lakes at the entrance where it runs out in the beach. We're only talking about moon phases and surf fishing, so you do catch them there. Tuggerah Lakes is a very, very, very shallow lake, like exceptionally shallow. It's the same if you look at Wallace Lake up near Foster. Once again, very, very shallow lake, and very rarely do you ever hear of a mulloway caught in there, but there's plenty of them that get caught just offshore there and down near the mouth where Wallace Lake runs out. So I think it's a lot of that's to do with depth. Lake Macquarie has an average depth in the middle of around about sort of 9.5 metres, 10 metres. St George's Basin's got a bit of depth about it, so they tend to hold there. Places like Port Stephens, which is an exceptionally deep natural harbour, then they can move in and out and go when they like. But Tuggerah, yeah, mate, good luck with that. If you catch a good one, I'd love to see a picture of it from inside Tuggerah Lake.
If you catch a good one, if he catches a good one, you're probably not going to see a picture of it, though. I guess that's the way it works with dewies, isn't it? Or if you take it somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to the next one. So Darren's asking, what colour palettes do you prefer, or that specifically suit mulloway spotting?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. So if we can look at conventional, I like that conventional sonar picture, because I use downscan to really say to me, like, that's definitely a mulloway. There's a few times I've had guys say to me, "Oh, I guess is that a dewey?" And I go, "Oh, no, the arch is not quite right." And then when you look at the downscan, it's 4 smaller fish swimming along together. So it's a school of Ludrick. If they're all 30 centimetres long, you put 4 of them together, then suddenly they're 1.2 metres long, or it's a school of bream, or it's a school of something else. But so that, if we have a look at that screenshot there, that's one of my favourite palettes. So I really like that sort of that reds and oranges in my conventional sonar. And then in downscan, I like either the blue or that bronzy colour, and I like the white fish reveal generally. The blue one there, I've actually got the fluoro green up, so that's, I use that a little bit as well. But my favourite one is probably the white fish reveal. I think it stands out, in bright sunny days. Look, the Lowrance have got those fantastic screens where you can see them with your polarised sunnies on anyway. But quite often I do like white. I don't mind that bright green, as long as it's a big contrast between the background. I think that makes a big difference. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So next question, we're going again with colour, but this time with lures. So Jai Cooper's asking, mate, preferred lures, but we've also got one earlier on about colours. Let me just find that one as well. So give us a run through on lures and lure colours for whoever it was that posted that question about lure colours. I can't find it, but I guess you talk to us about lures for dewies. Yeah.
So probably, we're talking about gulp there before. My favourite mulloway lure is probably a 6-inch gulp nemesis, either in the pink or the white. The white nemesis is probably a lure that just seems to be one of those go-to lures that really works. Has that real sort of winding action out of its tail. Produces a lot of scent, being a gulp product. That's an excellent one. The hollow bellies are back. So the hollow bellies are a fantastic lure that Berkeley had years ago, and for some reason, I don't know why it happened, but we stopped making them, or they stopped making them, I should say. They're back. They're fantastic on barra flatties, but mulloway, definitely, they've got a great rolling action, big paddle tail. But I guess if I've got a one go-to lure that I'm going to have a lot of confidence in, I reckon I'm throwing a vibe. So a shimmer fork, so fork tail vibes. I've used Trans Ams before over the years. 130 mil shimmer forks, bigger ones in the sort of slightly deeper water. and the paddle tail vibes if you're casting sort of shallow stuff and working it back. But if you've got any vertical structure you want to work, then definitely a fork tail vibe is the go. So they're probably my 3 go-to lures at the moment. And look, I do a lot of work with pure fishing and with the Berkeley guys, so I tend to work in that genre. But there's a lot of other lure manufacturers that have lures that are similar to those lures. I don't think anyone's got anything similar to Gulp. But if I had to dead set catch a dewey and you said, what am I going to throw? I'd be throwing a 6-inch Nemesis, I reckon. So
there you go. You heard it right here, guys. All right, Trevor O'Dare. G'day, Trevor. How you going, mate? Down there in Newcastle, a good mate of mine. So he's asking, Guesty, do you slow troll? And if yes, what colours do you use and when? Yeah,
so actually, myself, not a lot. Years and years ago, I used to do a bit of it, but it's something I want to get back into. But a mate of mine up in the mid-north coast further catches a lot of Mulloway slow trolling for them with hard bodies in that sort of 8 to 10 metres of depth of water using DX, the Nomad DX hard bodies. He has a great success with those. So in that sort of clearer looking colour, natural sort of natural colours. I quite often find Mulloway, I like natural colours for a lot of fishing, but certainly for Mulloway, I do tend to like those more natural colours or whites. White's a colour that stands out when you're fishing the back end of the tide when the water's a bit dirty. So, trolling. I have actually caught them down rigging before too, Mulloway. So, so actually slow trolling live baits and live squid even on down riggers can be really successful with a little bit of drop back. That works really well as well. So,
all right, let's keep moving. We've already had that one, so I'll scroll back down.
Yeah,
I think we've got about 25 questions still lined up here, Guesty, so we're not going to get through all of them.
Can I have a scotch and dry while I'm doing this? Just get weighted again.
No worries. That's why I keep going off screen, mate. I'm having a scotch here as we chat, so not really. All right, so look, Craig Engler coming back at another crack. So Craig's asking, would you bother tossing lures at a dewey if they appear to be inactive, or are you better off just coming back later? Good question, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think always you want to chuck there's nothing better than catching. If you're watching this and you're a bait fisherman for Mulloway, which, hey, don't worry, I've caught hundreds and thousands of them on bait. I love catching them on bait. But if you haven't caught one and felt those violent head shakes through polyethylene line, through braid, then you're really missing out on something, especially if you can catch one on light tackle. So I would always cast a lure first. You can always come back and soak a bait. But if they're not active, mark them in there. It's difficult if it's in just a big open area, just happen to be it's a school floating down the river. That can happen as well at times. But if it's on a bit of a bump or a bit of structure, that they're in that area, then I'd have a couple of casts at them. Doesn't work out, maybe come back, try something different, change colours, maybe change the angle that you're casting at sometimes can make a difference. Maybe stay a little bit further away and work your way in towards the fish a bit can also make a difference as well. But, I do love catching them on lures, but we've mentioned it already a few times. There's those peak bite times for Mulloway, as there is for a lot of our fish that we target. But tide changes and those low light conditions, that little window just on and after dark is really a gun period. So if you can spend that much time on the water, Craig, I'd be going back and having a crack at them then.
All right. Do Mulloway actively feed in river mouths after big rains, or is that just a myth, Guesty?
No, it is not a myth. It's fair income. That's the time to be there. So what it does, it pushes all of that food down and out. And I've caught them in Newcastle Harbour in the floods there, like big ones, 60-pounders, so 28, 30-kilo fish, and I've caught them there where I've actually caught them. And it was one time there I didn't have a barrel release weight, and then you put your hand in the water and taste it. It is fresh on top. So I've caught them underneath, down in the salt. The fresh is roaring out on the surface, but the salt pushed, on that incoming, best time to do it was on the incoming tide when the salt was pushing underneath and the fresh is running out, and you get this bit of a thermocline in between the two, and then you've got all these nutrients, and you've got mullet all being pushed down out in that sort of flood water. And then what I had to do is just quickly fly around out of Newcastle Harbour into Stockton Bight, back into the salt water and release them around there, because I could not get them to release properly in the fresh water because it's so fresh. So I actually had to, quickly get them in the boat, take off, run around the corner and release them in the salt, and they'd swim away all right, those big dewies. But 100%, that is a peak bite time, there's no doubt. You'll find most river systems, they've got breakwalls. It doesn't matter where you're fishing at, Yamba or Ballina or, wherever you are, Port Macquarie, and there'll be a back eddy that forms, at the end of the wall. That's a really good place to fish, where those fish will hold up and actively hunt around in there. And it's a good time to throw big hard-bodied lures, great big pre-rigged soft plastics, and work them. If you're really lucky at night, you'll hear them buffing the mullet on top, and that could be some of the best fishing you'll ever do. But it is certainly not a myth. I'll bust that one.
So winter coming up, rain's coming up in that part of the world down south. This is the time to do it, guys. So, Guesty Stephen Farr is asking, when you're fishing deeper offshore waters from Mulloway, do you find they hang near other baitfish, Mados, yellowtail, etc.?
Yeah, look, definitely. I think we mentioned that before. Any of those offshore reefs that consistently hold bait, and if you can find some structure, Jewies love a couple of things. They love somewhere to hang out. They love going to hanging out at their own little pub under the water there where they can hang out. They love easy access to baitfish. So if you've got both of those things, structure and bait. So quite often some of our, I've got a couple of bait reefs that I go and catch bait on up and down the coast, and they're just real hard. You'll see it on the Sounder, real hard bare rock, but it's a place where the bait will sit. I've never caught jewies on those spots. I just haven't caught them there. I think because there's no cover for the jewies, and you've got to think when you're thinking offshore, there's some big predators out there like big bull sharks and things that would just love to bite a mulloway in half. So they do have to sort of hang together and find a bit of cover. So if you can find anywhere where, and our modern sounders, like I run active imaging live. I've got fantastic pictures, and if you can find a bit of an undercut or a cave or a really good pinnacle that creates a back eddy where the fish can sit if there's a lot of current flow, so then structure bait, then the jewies aren't going to be far away.
Excellent stuff. All right, next question. We're rolling through them now. So we're moving north now, Guesty. We're targeting the black jews. So
right.
The question is, do you find the best time, or when do you find is the best time for black jew schooling in the northern central Queensland estuaries? And do they travel a long way up the estuaries, or do they stay around the mouth?
Oh, gee, you know what? I'm nearly on my P's with the black. I'm more of an elk-plate black jew man, so I'm going to have a bit of a crack at this. But from what I know of them, they do move in and out of the estuary systems, and they do seem to sort of hang around those mouths a little bit like the mulloway at home. So as far as I know, winter time is a good time to catch them just in and around those sort of river mouths and those sort of shallow estuary offshore systems. And then in summertime, when the water warms up a bit, they seem to push back up into the rivers a bit. That I don't know a lot about them. There's probably better people to ask about black jew. It's not something you'd think, being cousins, or sort of distant cousins, I'd know a bit more about them. But when I've caught them, I must admit I've had really good success when the water's been just coming out of winter, sort of that springtime. On shallow offshore reefs is where I've found them sort of schooling up around the headlands. So what part of their migration period that is, I wouldn't like to say. So
that's dry season, of course, in central Queensland. So that's sort of when the water's had a chance to clear up and there's not as much fresh coming down, I guess.
Yep. So you had to throw that tricky one in, didn't you? I thought we were talking.
Mate, you were just cruising along too well. You had all the answers. So I had to just take you down a notch or two. So
somebody might come in and answer that, which I would love to know as well. So
that'll be tremendous. Yep. So Nicholas, I hope that helps in some respect, some degree, and we look forward to somebody else chiming in with some answers on that one. So, Guesty, the Berkeley hollow bellies referred to as a swim bait, are they just as effective when they're hopped along as when you slow roll them?
Definitely. You can give them a bit of a rip, and then but they have this fantastic slow roll. If you watch them, they are just such a great lure. It's why the Barra guys love them so much. I filmed a show 2 weeks ago with a young mate of mine, Jack, and we caught 15 Murray cod for the session, all on hollow bellies with that fantastic big shoulder roll that they get with that paddle tail. So I think they're most effective in that rolling situation. They're not the sort of lure that you really need to rip too much, but you can certainly give them a good lift, and they swim. The one thing with the hollow bellies, when you cast it out, you're fishing straight away. So cast it out, close that bail arm over, or or put your reel into gear if you're fishing with a low profile bait caster. And then as it sinks, it swims the whole time. It is the lure that you are fishing with from the minute it hits the surface. So.
There you go. So we've just got a comment here from Callan. Ripstop deep diving Rapala work a treat down south.
Oh, good. Yeah. Cool. Excellent. That's good to know.
So Kelvin Trimble, what settings do you have your side scan on, sensitivity and contrast?
Oh, gee. How long is a piece of string, Kelvin?
We've got another couple of hours, haven't we, Guesty, to get through this one?
So I generally have my side scan. If I'm in 10 metres water, I've generally got it out around about 28 to 30 metres. So I've got it out a fair way. And I'm looking for any of those little shadows that are way out in the distance. It could possibly be a Mulloway, or I'm looking for patches of bait as well. So as far as the sensitivity goes, or the contrast, you'll find if you pull your contrast up too high, it'll tend to make the background too light, and whatever you're going to mark a little bit too light. So you might have to pull that contrast back a bit, so you get, and you can see in that screenshot there now, those barra, everything's pretty well spot on to get those barra pictures like that on the side scan. So play around. But the best thing to do is play around with it. It all depends a lot on water clarity and how much water flow you've got, the whole, and what depth you're in. All those things play a big part. One thing that you may need to do with your engine is trim your outboard up a little bit so that you get a really good picture both sides. You can even see in that screenshot there, we've just got a little bit of a darker line on that side where the barra are, because that's trying to shoot past the leg of the engine a bit. We've got it trimmed up a bit, but not up probably quite high enough there. So if we trim that up further, that leg, you'll get a cleaner picture. In saying that, I'm not overly worried about what I'm seeing just there. I'm more looking out a little bit further, which is where those barra are. So just really, you got to experiment, and that's a big thing. If I can give anybody a tip with using sounders and finding fish and staying on fish, is don't. I've been in with guys before who say, don't touch the sounder. That's a setting I always have it on. And I go, oh man, well you're in trouble, because the water doesn't stay the same all the time. Salinity. Obviously, the amount of fresh water, which is basically virtually the same thing, amount of salinity in the water, how fresh it is, how much suspended sediments in the water, that all makes a big difference to the picture you're going to get, and you've got to adjust your settings to suit. So.
Thank you for that, Guesty. So hope that answers your question there. Now, we've got a whole bunch more questions coming in. I'm going to take two more, Guesty, and I think we might start to wrap it up, because you've been talking just about non-stop for an hour.
And that's I'm not good at many things, Greg, but I go all right talking, so that's all right.
Talking's one of the things you're not so bad at. All right, well, that's good. So we've got two questions that are quite similar here, so I'll just bring one of them up. So this is Mark Newman. He's asking, what's the lightest setup that you use for casting vibes and plastics at Mulloway?
Mark Newman. I think I actually know Mark. I'm sure I know Mark Newman. So 3 to 5 kilo. I use a 7'4" Abu Garcia Veritas rod when I'm vibing a lot. 3 to 5. I like the extra bit of length to just get a slightly bigger cast, and you can get some good long lifts with it. It's still got enough tip to sort of really set the hook, so you don't want to go too light. A Mulloway can spit your lure out just as quick as it bites it in the first place, a little bit bite barra. So when you feel that bite, you really do need to jam the hooks in pretty quick. I generally use anywhere from 8 to 10 pound PE in my local system there. If I'm fishing around structure, I'll go up to 20 pound braid, and then 30 to 40 pound leaders. But in my local estuary, I'm quite often using 8 pound and 15 pound leader. So we fish really light for them, mainly because there's not a lot of structure, and they're feeding in and around bait schools a little bit more. In saying that, I have been dusted a couple of times before, but that's all part of it. But catching even an 80 centimetre Mulloway on that light tackle is such good fun, and they generally release really well, and they're good looking fish. And you've been lucky, we've caught them up to 1.26 on that sort of tackle before, so I've caught some quite big ones. And I did actually lose one with my young bloke on that tackle. He fought one for an hour 35. It towed us 1.6 kilometres and then did us on a concrete barge in the end. And I saw it once, and I don't want to tell you how big that fish was, but it was a mammoth.
I think the thing about dewies is they're not like kingies and some other species that are going to bury on a reef. They tend to fight fairly clean. They take some pretty long runs, and usually, my experience anyway, when they do dust you on something like a concrete pylon, it's just because they've happened to go past it. The line's been dragged over it, not that they're necessarily diving into it. So interested in your views on that, Guesty?
Big one, yeah, this big one was a little bit different, where it just kept wanting to go there, and I actually headed it off a few times. So I got in front of the fish off the side, so we were pulling back at it to drive it away. I managed to steer it away about 5 or 6 times, and in the end, it just went and sat under the barge and just robbed us off, unfortunately. But it was a fish, and I'm going to say, I know people listening at the moment, I've caught a lot of big jewies, but it was a fish that was up towards 100 pounds. So it was a mega one, biggest one I've ever seen anyway. So I wish I hadn't seen it. I wish I could tell myself, no, it was a foul bull shark or something, but it was great to see anyway.
Another bloody eagle ray.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Last question for the night. So thanks everyone for posting so many questions. It's been a great conversation. So George Gray's asking, if there's a lack of bait around in Lake Mac, what else do you look for when you're targeting the old Mulloway?
Oh, you got to go and hit some structure. And Lake Macquarie, there's plenty of pages that tell you where the artificial reefs are. There's old tire barges and things like that. So they're all worth a look. So they're all places where the fish will hang around, and you quite often find some of those sort of areas. The Mulloway will be sitting anything up to 100 yards away from there. So don't just rock up on the top of that, look at your sounder and go, oh, there's no one home, I'm going to the next spot. Just sort of do a bit of a slow circle that gets bigger away with your side scan, down scan, and traditional sonar going, and you will quite often find that they're held up away from that area. So if you can't find bait on your sounder, conventional bait, you'll catch them underneath the salmon schools, and certainly underneath tailor schools. You'll find the fishing is better underneath the tailor schools when they're held in one area for a while, so they create that natural burley trail. And if it's just like a blow up here and then they take off and another little blow up, can be a little bit difficult fishing there. But I'd be fishing those areas. Anywhere, like Lake Macquarie is like a massive impoundment to a degree. So anywhere you've got wind pushing onto any of the rocky points, all those steep rocky points and the lake's full of those, I'd be sort of concentrating around there as well if you can't find bait. So
tremendous stuff. I guess I think we're done. I think we can let you go off and have that scotch and dry.
All right.
And replenish your voice box. I think you've earned it, mate. So, look, thanks so much for coming along, and thanks for being so willing and eager to share what you know. It's tremendous to hear from an angler of your caliber to get questions answered that people have. So it's been brilliant. We really appreciate all of that.
That's not a problem. I think the biggest thing is it's always good to engage with people who are interested in the same things that we're interested in. But the big thing is you learn something every time you go out. So that's a big thing. None of us know everything. Some of us have probably been sunburned a few more times and had a few days had more days where you've caught nothing, and that's what you get. That's how you learn. You learn just as much from the days where you catch nothing as you do when you have success. But just Mulloway, one of those fish where you just got to persist. And if you persist and put the time in and think about what you're doing and learn from your peers, then eventually it'll happen for you. So good luck with that. And thanks for everybody who's joined in, and thanks to both to Greg and for Lowrance for hosting. It's been good fun.
It's been tremendous. I've really enjoyed it. And folks, of course, this time next week, we're going to do it all again. So we're going to have Lee Rayner come and join us. We're going to talk blue water sonar this time. We're going to get into the Simrad products, and we're going to go off looking for bluefin tuna and sawfish. So be sure and join us. And I'm going to put some links up in just a moment. If you're interested in that Sonar Masterclass, by all means, zap along to the links I'm about to give you and enter your questions in advance so that Lee's got some time to get some screenshots to help illustrate what he's trying to say, just as Guesty's done tonight. So, Guesty, once again, thank you very much. It's been tremendous, mate. Really enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
I'm sure we'll do that. Thanks. See you guys. Good luck on the water. See ya. Bye.